We are not against good transportation. Nobody is against good transportation. Our alternative will be beef up the Amtrak. You know, Amtrak can go at 125, 175 miles an hour. Go ahead, beef up the Amtrak. There is nothing wrong in it. We are not. Nobody's against transportation or good transportation. We need that. We need that transportation between LA and Bakersfield, not through Lancaster, directly over the Grape Mine, so people can come here.
I'm just pointing out that it's your
But
opinion,
heavy maintenance
and
facility.
we need to talk about facts.
No,
Those
but-
decisions have not been made, Dr.
No, I know they are not
I
being-
want other people to ask.
And I made it very
questions, so
clear,
that-
I made it very clear, that, ladies and gentlemen, that's not coming here. Because Fresno has inside track. Yes, that's an opinion, but there is one facility which is being dangled everywhere else. If we do not have tracks, if they run out of money, by the time they get to Fresno, we are not gonna have tracks or train, forget the facility.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
It's your opinion.
I have a question for Supervisor Watson. I have a question for you. I don't have an opinion. My question is, you've been in public service for a long time. There have been other big projects in this area and in this state over the years. Perhaps none quite of this size or impact, but have you seen this kind of passionate reaction to other projects over the years?
Well, I think there was, with respect to the peripheral canal, for example. That's one of the reasons why it wasn't built and why I've spent a lot of time up north now trying to get counties and people together to see if we can get that back on track. But it hasn't been quite this passionate. I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that we are heavily in debt. And I think even though there's a lot of passion against it, I think it's more against the plan as it exists. I will tell you that I support high-speed rail, but I have not gained the confidence yet that they have the solution. I don't think the authority has the solution yet. And I was going to say in closing comments that most of these problems start with politicians. Some politician said, you know, we need to improve our transportation in California. Yes, we do. We need to compete with the airlines, so we need to get from Anaheim to San Francisco or Sacramento in 3.3 hours and 47 minutes or whatever it is, which means the trains have to go a certain speed. And you know, that's good, but that got built into the legislation. They turned it over to an engineer, and an engineer said, you can't get from point A to point B in that amount of time if you have curves over a certain number of degrees in the track, which is why now we have these red and blue lines going through metropolitan Bakersfield, which are taking out things that probably shouldn't have to be taken out. And I wish there were a way to go back and revise that legislation to something that's more realistic. If you add 15 or 20 minutes and you go through Bakersfield without destroying these things, you reduce the cost tremendously. And you know, if you pull up the maps of the Metrolink in Los Angeles, it comes out to Palmdale and Lancaster, and you look at all those lines, they all feed in there. It's a perfect place to start in the south. And you can look at BART up in the northern Bay Area and comes out to Pleasanton. I mean, you can hook into those things. I'm not sure that the people in the LA Basin and in the Bay Area want trains going through their metropolitan area at 200 miles an hour. I think they'd be real happy with 70 miles an hour with no crossings. So, you know, if they build it back to a reasonable scale, I would say that if you took the construction out of the LA Basin and out of the Bay Area and just got through the Tehachapis and through the valley and connected those two existing systems, you'd probably have about a $25 billion project instead of a $119 billion project. And you wouldn't destroy nearly as many properties. You would have the ability to move around existing rights of ways and so forth. Yeah, you'll have a few more curves. I don't think the riders care whether they're going 220 miles an hour or 120 miles an hour. All they want is to be able to get on it and get there in one piece without having to fight. I mean, I tell you, our roads and highways have been taken over by trucks. And you're out there, you're going 80 miles an hour in the left lane, and a truck pulls out, and you've got all of these, cars blown by there, and all of a sudden everybody's slamming on their brakes. I hardly take a trip without seeing an accident anymore. And so we need to do something.
Well, Ray, and that's a great point you make. Wasn't the federal, when they talked about the blended system, then the federal money, they're saying, is contingent on the 2 hour and 40 minutes. So how do you do a blended system yet meet the demands?
That's the problem. That's why I'm saying it's too bad we
Yeah.
can't go back and redo the legislation. The problem started with the original legislation, which was not thought through. You had a politician on one end and an engineer on the other end, and they didn't talk to each other. And I think that's why we are where we are. Gene, you may have a different thought, but.
Oh, it's 2 hours and 40 minutes, but it's in
Well-
state law. You're absolutely right. That was set, I think it's in Prop 1A.
Yeah.
But that's part of the problem.
The blended system will no longer make that a liability.
That hasn't been decided. I think Dr. Patel has a good point on the fact that if they're gonna use the same track on Caltrains from San Francisco to San Jose and from Union Station to Anaheim in that area, it's gonna be a slower train. How slow, we don't know yet, but that's a new concept. It's in the business plan.
It is,
And
blended, we call it blended plan.
And, and it's probably gonna impact the 2 hours and 40 minutes. I don't know how we get around that, but that's part of the problem.
May I ask a quick follow-up? I know this course is supposed to be, today's course is supposed to be about jobs. And my question is jobs a component of the bill? Is it a requirement, or is it just a politically important point of discussion?
I think it's a political point that's being made by the project proponents, and it will bring jobs. I think it will improve California's economy. For a state that was once the 6th largest economy in the world and now is 8th and probably going in the wrong direction from there, I think we have one of the worst transportation infrastructures in the country. I mean, it's pathetic. We just are not keeping up with it. And, as taxpayers, we're not willing to make the investments that are necessary. We wouldn't have the California aqueduct. We wouldn't have agriculture in Kern County if people back in 1950 didn't have the guts to stand up and say, we're going to pay for this. And, it had a lot of flack and opposition at that time, but if they hadn't have done it and thought forward, we would be a very backward state. So, you need to take a risk, but I honestly feel that the plan that's on the table right now is not a good business risk. I mean, I've been in business for many years, and I think there's a better way to do it. I think we got started off on the wrong foot, and we don't have any way to get out of it now.
If I can address that a little bit, I think the jobs issue is, Mr. Watson is correct. It's not part of Prop 1A or any of this. The project, they started as a green project. When the green thing failed, it became a jobs project. Now it is becoming an alternative cost project that is gonna cost $174 billion if we don't do this, which is again, and we can address it in the next sessions because it's not part of it. So it is politics, and they are trying to sell it as either one or to the other. And I agree with Mr. Watson, and we all agree that there is a need for improved transportation in the state of California. Question is how to go about it. And that is where we vehemently disagree with this, because it's a boondoggle.
It's a bad plan.
Gentlemen,
Well, for full disclosure, I'm co-founder of Save Bakersfield, okay? But, and it's in particular related to jobs. I'm just going to comment for a couple of minutes. I think we want to stop this project so we can take a fresh look, okay? If the object is to get people from Beta Basin, okay? What are we doing over here in the valley arguing about getting people from Bakersfield to San Jose, etc.? I've lived here 37 years, and I've ever heard one person say, life would be better if I could only get to San Jose in an hour and a half, okay? So the Beta Basin concept, because you justify it by, they're talking about the gates at LAX and at San Francisco.